Thank you. Well, I'm just delighted to be with you today. This is one of my favorite groups, and I am going to, in just a minute here, uh, put on some slides to get started. Let me just share screen and okay. Right, I'm going to be talking to you today about how the soul views loss. This is the topic of my new book, and I'm going to give you some background information on that as we get into how the soul views loss and how we can heal from loss, knowing the view that we have as souls of loss. So let me begin by talking a bit about all the loss that we've been experiencing lately. Loss is a major issue in life always, but most recently, loss has been an even bigger situation in our lives. The COVID-19 pandemic, these figures are all actually from last week. They're even worse now. 256,072,650 cases, 5,132,202 deaths worldwide. So there's been lots of loss. Immediately we think of loss of loved ones when we think about the pandemic, but there also is a loss of health. So many people are ill for extended periods of time, and with long COVID, it can go on for a very long time. There's employment disruption, financial difficulties. There are a whole cascading group of losses that occur from the COVID-19 pandemic. But in spite of that, loss is always present in the population. And the major problems that ensue from loss are grief, anxiety, and depression. Now, when I talk about loss today, I'm going to talk about it from the perspective of the work of Dr. Michael Newton. His groundbreaking work was the first to tell us that we are souls who incarnate on earth to learn and build soul character. We're not humans who have souls. We're souls who are here having a human experience. Our true home is in the spirit realm, and there's an earth curriculum. We can think of coming to earth as coming to school, and there is a curriculum. One of the major aspects of that curriculum is loss and dealing with loss. We plan each life carefully. While on earth, it's our higher self that provides us with guidance. So great loss is a spiritual experience. It's an experience that our souls come to earth actually to have, one of the experiences. It includes such things as death of a loved one, divorce, career disruption, financial ruin, a health crisis, or any major disappointment that we might experience in our lives. So there is no one who comes to earth who does not have the experience of loss. However, not all losses are what I would term a great loss. So let me explain a little bit more about what a great loss is. Great loss shatters our world, robbing us of our sense of safety, stability, and self-assurance. It feels so devastating because it robs us of our certainty and confidence in an uncertain world. And healing from great loss takes longer and is more difficult than other losses because we must rebuild our lives from the foundation. I experienced a number of losses in my life before I lost my daughter 5 years ago. I experienced a divorce, which was painful. I experienced the loss of my mother, and I experienced the loss of my brother. All of those losses were quite painful, but they were nothing like the loss of my daughter. In my life, my first great loss was the loss of my daughter, and I explain why that is so in my book. So how does great loss differ from other losses? It differs in the attitudes and behaviors that we're holding before the loss, and I'll explain that a bit further in just a minute. It differs in the state of mind that we're in when the loss occurs, the condition that we find ourselves in after the loss, the associated losses, and the unprecedented opportunity for spiritual growth that a great loss offers. So the attitudes and behaviors before the loss, let me go back to that previous slide. When we experience a great loss, we are stuck in patterns that are limiting our spiritual growth. We may be preoccupied with someone else's dreams or struggles. In my case, my daughter had experienced a very unfortunate incidents of violence. And afterwards, I was just absolutely devastated by that. And I turned all my attention and all my efforts toward helping her heal, to the point where I was no longer thinking about my own goals or aims or my own spiritual growth. It could be that we're engrossed in a career or social quest, and that we're so busy with that that we put aside our personal spiritual growth. Or it could be that we're living a very busy, distracted life, that there's one thing after another, and who has time to see what we're feeling inside or to think about where our life is going. Or it could be that we have found a nice, comfortable place to rest in. In other words, we're sheltering in a complacent, easy space where we've traded safety and security for joy, fulfillment, and going after our life goals. So the attitude that we're stuck in when the loss occurs is we are in the process of neglecting the soul's imperative for growth. So let me go on. There are also some associated losses that occur with great loss. Loss of identity. In the case of loss of a loved one, my major loss, I'm very active professionally, so I think most people would have thought that was my main identity, my professional identity, but they would have been wrong. My major identity was as a mother. And when I lost my daughter, I lost my major identity. In a divorce, you lose the identity of being a spouse, being in a couple. We can go down any loss you might have, a great loss, and you will lose identity. If you suddenly become alienated from an organization that you've been passionate about, that's really been part of your identity, you lose that piece of yourself. So one of the associated losses is a loss of identity. A second loss is loss of expectations. Well, my expectation was that my daughter and I, who were very close, would have this close relationship our whole life. I knew that she would go off and make her own relationships and have her own life, but I always thought that we would be a major part of each other's lives. Also, I looked forward to the day that maybe I would be a grandmother, and I also looked forward to having her around as I was going through aging and perhaps health problems later in my life. But I lost all those expectations. The same is true for any of the other losses we can look at. Financial disaster. We lose the expectations of what we might have in our lives in the future. Our loss of security, our loss of the things that we would like to provide for not only us, but our families, and perhaps what we might want to give to the community. Loss of security is another social loss. When we lose someone we love, it causes us to feel less secure. There's a sense of insecurity when someone very important and very close to us is suddenly gone. The same is true of many other losses. For example, when we have a major career disruption, our career provided a great deal of security in our lives. And when something happens to that, suddenly we're left with a feeling of loss of security. Loss of independence may be another associated loss. When we become ill or disabled, we suddenly lose independence. We also lose independence when we have a career disruption or a financial disaster, because we may have to depend on others at that point. So not only do we have the main loss with great loss, but we may also have associated losses, which make it much more difficult. So how does the soul view loss? First of all, we as humans view loss as a tragic experience. When we experience a loss, we're devastated, especially a major loss, and it feels like the worst thing that could have happened to us. The soul, however, views loss as an opportunity, not as a tragic experience. There is no loss in the spiritual realm. It's a place of universal love and harmony, and so we do not experience loss there. So we come to earth to experience loss and the negative emotions that come from it while we're having an earth experience. So loss is a major part of the earth school curriculum. And all of us experience it at some time in our lives and in some form. Loss is by far not the only aspect of the earth curriculum. And I plan to write in subsequent books more about what I see as other major parts of the earth curriculum. But loss is certainly an important part. And as I said, the loss that we experience, the greater it is, the more the soul views it as an opportunity, and the greater the opportunity it provides for growth. So one of the major aspects of experiencing a great loss is the opportunity for growth. Now, let me hasten to say here that no one should be told this in the early stages after they've just experienced a major loss. As humans, we are just not ready to hear this. Had someone tried to tell me this in the early months after I lost my daughter, it would have made me very angry, very upset. We're just not ready for that yet, because as humans, no matter how much we know about death or the afterlife, it is a painful experience. And we're not ready to hear that as souls, we really view the loss as an opportunity for growth. This is something that we can learn from further down the road. My opinion on that is we need to go through what we've seen in the literature as a typical stages or phases of grieving first. And we need to come to a point in our loss where we're focusing less on what we've lost and a little more about what's missing in us. I came to a point after the loss of my daughter when I'd been through a lot of the early stages of grieving, but I was back to my usual activities. And I think everyone around me would have thought, well, she has recovered from that. Nothing could have been further from the truth. I was feeling empty and dead inside, even though I was functioning on the outside in a quasi, anyway, normal fashion. That is the point where we can benefit from and learn from the soul's perspective on loss. But we're not ready for it until we come to that point. So, what are the opportunities for growth from a great loss? First of all, one of the ways that we build soul character while we're on earth is overcoming adversity. When we can approach a difficult situation in our lives, transcend it, and deal with it in a positive manner, that helps us build soul character. A second opportunity for growth is it gives us a timeout. What great loss does is it knocks us completely off center, and suddenly we're kind of dazed and we're wondering what's going on, what's happening, what has occurred to me. So it gives us some time out to start thinking again about what we want our life to be and what our chosen path in life is. Why did we come here? What was our purpose? So a great loss gives us time out to look at where we're going in life. And the third opportunity for growth is it gives us an opportunity to learn resistant life lessons. We've learned from life between life sessions that many individuals spend many lifetimes trying to learn certain resistant life lessons. I'm an example. I've been a helper all my life and for many lives past. And that's a wonderful thing because people do need help. But there's a point after which helpful is no longer helpful. And that point is when we need to pull back. We don't want to help so much that we keep the person from helping themselves when they should and learning their own lessons. My problem was I would go a little bit too far. And I'd been trying to learn that lesson for literally lifetimes. But this one, with my great loss, suddenly gave me an opportunity to learn that lesson. It was a strange thing because as a nurse, I'd been teaching about not helping patients too much when they needed to help themselves. But yet, in my own personal life, I was making the same mistake. I think we learn these core lessons in phases, and that one of the things great loss does is it helps us learn that last phase of resistant life lessons that have taken us a while to learn. So how does a great loss differ from other losses? First of all, a great loss takes longer to heal than other losses. Now, there is no set time that anyone needs to heal from a loss. It takes as long as it takes. Some people heal very quickly. Others take years, maybe even decades, to heal from a loss. There is no set time, but one thing I can say with confidence is that a great loss takes longer to heal than other losses. Secondly, it brings up all previously unhealed losses. So not only are we dealing with what we have just lost, but anything that we have not healed properly from past losses is going to come up as well. Now, this feels pretty badly when we're in the midst of it, but actually it's a wonderful opportunity to heal all those previously unhealed losses. The next thing that a great loss does is it reveals what is missing in us. I said previously that when a great loss occurs, we were stuck in patterns that were limiting our spiritual growth. I think when we become too involved in someone else's life, living our lives according to what their dreams and plans are, or become too involved with a quest such as becoming famous or making an organization really powerful and useful, we can become so caught up in that we neglect what we came here to earth as souls to learn. What was it we wanted to experience and wanted to learn? And the more that we don't attend to those things, the more that we begin to feel empty inside and that we begin to feel not okay. And so a great loss reveals to us what is missing in us. The next aspect of how a great loss differs from other losses is it requires us to build a new foundation for our life. I'll use my own loss as an example. Yes, I had a very active professional career. I had a very active social life at many aspects of my life. But the core of my life, what made me who I was and what I saw as my identity, was being a mother to my daughter. And when I lost my daughter, it just created a crumbling of the foundation of my life. And in healing from that loss, I needed to rebuild the foundation for my life. And that takes a bit longer than what we might be required to do in lesser losses. And the last thing I want to mention is that great loss offers an unprecedented opportunity for growth. If we can face the loss head on, heal from the loss in the manner that is right for our particular loss, we will experience unprecedented spiritual growth and the building of our soul character. We also not only will grow as a soul, but will grow as a human being and become richer, happier, more joyful, and more fulfilled. So, how do we heal from a great loss? It's important to care for the physical, psychological, and spiritual self. We know that after a loss, we're much more likely to experience either an illness or an injury. A lot of the literature says in the first year or two, but really with a great loss, it can be as much as 6 years. And in the people that I have cared for in my practice who have experienced great losses, every one of them has experienced some type of physical illness or injury. In my great loss workshops, that holds true as well. Everyone could point out a physical illness or an injury. Therefore, it's really important to take care of ourselves physically following a great loss. And I outline in my book many ways that you can do that. There's a major disruption to our physical lives with a great loss. Every aspect of our life is affected. We don't sleep well. We don't eat properly. We may eat too much or not anything at all. Every aspect of our daily life is affected, and we just plain don't feel comfortable in our daily lives anymore for a period of time until we experience some healing. We also must care for our psychological selves. The big thing following a loss that I see in my patients is this underlying constant anxiety. We no longer feel as secure as we once did. We thought we knew how things were going in our lives and how life worked. But then this great loss occurred, and suddenly it just doesn't feel as safe. We don't feel as if we know what's going on anymore. There's an underlying anxiety. A second thing I see is a great loss affects all our relationships. We're not the same person after we experience a great loss. Things change in our lives. So we're not the same. And for a while, this is probably profound, and it can have an effect on many of our relationships until we readjust them. We may find that we just don't fit with some people anymore. And we might also find that it strengthens many of our relationships, or that people that before we weren't particularly close to really were there for us when we needed someone to help us, and new relationships form. And lastly, we need to take care of our spiritual self. Taking care of our spiritual self means that we need to learn the lessons that were embedded within our loss. Again, we're not ready to do that until we've healed the wounds that we've experienced from our loss. So let me go to that next. It's important that we heal the wounds of our great loss. We need to take some time away from our usual activities, quiet time, time to be with ourselves, to heal those wounds. And during that period, we need to engage in extreme self-care, because we need it at that point. If we fail to do this, that will forever be inside of us and be affecting our chances for health, happiness, and learning the lessons and having the experiences that we came here to Earth to learn. And next, we need to return to our own life path. Because previously we were kind of stalled or stuck in following the plans that we made for this life, we need to return to that path. The key to that is getting back into the habit of listening to our higher self, our inner guidance. That's the compass that we have to stay on track when, as souls, we come here to Earth to have an experience. If we fail to listen to this inner guidance, it is unlikely that we will stay on our path. And in fact, we may stray quite far from it. So one of the things that we need to do as we heal from great loss is to return to our own life path through listening to our inner guidance. And lastly, we need to learn and grow from the loss that we've experienced. So I've really talked about most of these. In physical care, we need self-care, accident prevention, good health care. An example of this is broken heart syndrome. That's a psychological symptom that comes from anxiety. It's real, but it's not dangerous. However, it feels like it's a heart attack, and it might be. So we need to have that checked, even though it might just be broken heart syndrome. Psychological, anxiety reduction, we need to attend to our relationships. And another thing is that our self-confidence takes a hit when we experience a great loss, and that needs to be rebuilt. It's spiritual care that is especially important during a great loss. We need to harvest the lessons that come from the great loss. We need to reconnect or connect, maybe for some people for the first time, with our higher self and our spiritual guidance, the guidance of our spirit guides and those in the spirits that are spiritual world that are helping us. We need to find renewed purpose for our lives, and we can connect with departed loved ones. Craig, I want to let you know that I talked about your method for connecting with departed loved ones in my book and how it helped me at the time that I was going through this. I think that past life regression can be very helpful during this period of time. It can direct us to past lives related to our loss. We can ask our past self what they would have done differently and what they learned from the losses that they experienced. We can ask for comfort and advice on healing. We can connect with departed loved ones. I'm doing a lot of work with an organization called the Helping Parents heal. And during those sessions, I help the parent connect with the child that they've lost. And we can ask any related person in spirit to come forward who can provide us with insight or assistance for dealing with our loss. I also would recommend Life Between Lives sessions. It's most effective later on, after the initial mourning has taken place. It's important to set the intention with the client before we even begin the induction. And we want to ask during these sessions how this loss fits into our life plans. We want to concentrate on the lessons that were brought to us from the loss. And again, we can ask for comfort and assistance with healing. And we also can get guidance on connection with our departed loved one and other spirits with helpful insights. So I think both past life regression and Life Between Lives sessions can be very helpful later on in dealing with a great loss. And lastly, I want to just give you an offer. That is, Llewellyn has allowed me to offer a 20% discount right now to you if you go to their website, www.llewellyn.com. Set up a Llewellyn account first if you don't have one. Sign in, then enter the code Healing Loss at checkout. And that is good until January 31st, 2022. The book now has been delayed in release, so it won't be coming out until January 8th of 22. So I'm going to stop at this point, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.